All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're live and we're kicking. So today we're going to talk a little bit about housing in the Netherlands and how do you find a place to live, if you can, and where could you look. So I'm going to take you through quite a lot. As you can hear and see, I'm a little bit unshaven. So as you can hear, my voice is also not great. That's because I'm still in the midst of COVID. But I thought, well, you guys need to know this information rather sooner than later, and we already postponed it by a week because of COVID. So today I'm going to do my best and make sure that you guys get the information or as much of it as possible. During the presentation, or as I'm taking you through some slides, if there's anything else you would like to know, do not hesitate to ask the questions. Just put it in the chat in YouTube, and I'll pick it up from there and we'll answer it from there. I don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, so if you would please do it in English, that'd be great. If, however, that is difficult for you, do not hesitate to ask the questions in either Ukrainian or Russian. I've got a friend, Kostya Tomaspolsky, he's also in the group, and what Kostya will do is he will translate those questions for me from either Russian or Ukrainian. He himself is from Odessa, currently living in Italy, and he will translate it for me and I can then answer the questions. Now, what makes me a guru on housing? Nothing really, except that I came here to the Netherlands as a foreigner from Africa, specifically South Africa, and in doing so, I had to learn a lot of things along the way. I now own my own property, and I'm busy creating a second property which we'll be renting out, and some of my friends have done the same. So I've gone through quite a lot of everything from renting all the way through to renting out, all the way through to owning a property, and all the taxes and dramas that go with that. So to help you a little bit, I've tried to create a slide deck that explains to you how the Dutch housing market works, what the different elements are. And again, this is not a deep dive. I'm not going to go into huge financial calculation models. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible, but ask and fire away. If I cannot answer the question, we will answer it on the Coaches4Ukraine Facebook page, and I will ask my network if necessary to provide us the answers that we need so we can give you the answers that you need. All right. So without further ado, I think we should start. And I hope you guys can see that okay. Yeah, it seems like the graphics are working. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with housing. We have had a session already about culture. We're also going to do one about income, basically work. So how do you work? What kind of work can you do? What kind of contractual obligations are there? And so on. We'll do a little bit of a session on that. At the end of the session, I'll quickly just make a remark about that and give you some ideas as to when that should happen. But as far as I know, it's going to be next week. Then we also have an element called coping, and that is to do with what we provide as a service. Now, Coaches4Ukraine was set up to bring coaches from around the world, predominantly English-speaking, or have English as a second language, so coaches from South Africa, from Canada, from the US, from the UK, France, Germany, from everywhere together to help you cope with where you're settling in now. So the coaches, because they're mainly speaking English, it is geared towards people with tertiary education or that speak English relatively okay. But we also have trauma psychologists and psychologists that will help, and we're currently working on getting coaches and psychologists from the Ukraine, maybe even sponsored, but we're looking at that. But for the coaches that do their services in English, we provide that service completely for free. It's one coach per coachee for a commitment of 3 months, twice a month, just so that you know there is help out there. If you need to talk to someone, we're here for you. Now, that was a little bit of an explanation about Coaches4Ukraine. There's also a Facebook group, as I said, and you can get to that Facebook group and register there if you're not already registered. All these videos that we do, these YouTube videos, I already have a YouTube channel called Exponential Leadership. And on that Exponential Leadership site is where you are now, all's good and well. Then here we will be doing sessions every week for an hour, hour and a half, talking about a specific topic that can help you settle in within the Netherlands. And eventually we'll also expand that to Germany, Spain, France, and Italy as we go along and gather more people that can also explain things in those countries. So to know a little bit more about who's currently running all of this, my name is Exen de Waal, And I told you already where I'm from. I live in Amsterdam, but originally from South Africa. And my best friend in Ukraine has always been Kostya. And Kostya and I did our MBAs together. And Kostya's a great friend of mine. And he's helping us out today. And he's also helping us manage the Coaches for Ukraine initiative. Again, thank you, Kostya, for that. And thank you for helping out today as well. All right, so the Netherlands and housing. So where are we going to go with this? I'm going to now just make this big screen so you guys can see the slides better, and we'll take it from there. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and aim it towards practical advice, stuff that you can do. But firstly, we have to start with a little bit of theory so you can understand what the market is like. And I just realized my slide deck does not show the slides in the order it should. Let me just quickly see where the problem is slipped into. Alrighty, here we go. That's better. So, housing in Europe. Now, in the European Union, the one thing that you may not be aware of yet, because coming from Ukraine, you're not part of the European Union yet. We hope that'll happen sometime soon. The European Union has statistics that it keeps on all member states and everything that happens in those member states. Now, the Dutch have been very well known for the last 600-700 years to keep detailed records. Now, that was also a problem in the Second World War. As you can imagine, people that end up at concentration camps, it was easier for the people to find them. So, but that also means the Dutch still keep very good records. So every day, every year, every week, every month, there's statistical updates to an entity called the Centraal Bureau of Statistics, or the CBS. And the CBS, you can find information usually up to the last year, or even as short or as recent as last quarter. So I've taken those statistics mainly, and some of the statistics from European sources, or European Union sources. So what I've done is I've referenced every single slide. So if you ever watch this back, you just pause, type across what you need at the bottom. I will also put all those links in the comments in the YouTube channel. So just at the bottom here, so you guys have more information that you can click on and link through to and see the details if you ever need to do that. All right. So some of the problems we're currently facing is because of the war, gas prices have gone through the roof. So do realize that when you rent, if you rent in an older property or a property that does not have a good energy label, so that's one of the things to look out for is what is the current property's energy label, then you will spend more money on gas and electricity, all right, because you need to warm the place. So the worse the insulation, the more you're going to pay, all right. And your gas and energy and electricity is never included in your rent. So let's just look a little bit at rental properties and the rental market. So you can see here, there's different kinds of property ownership and rental. Now that is a cultural thing that happens across Europe, and specifically here, I want you to look at the Netherlands. Now the Netherlands is, if I'm not mistaken, that bar over there. And so you'll see about 70% of the Netherlands is ownership and about 30% rental. Now that doesn't really make sense because it's a much larger chunk of that ownership that's owned by housing corporations, so not necessarily private individuals or maybe even owned by businesses. So the rental market is actually quite a bit bigger than it looks like there. So things you need to know is, where are you in the country? Now, the Netherlands is split up into a bunch of provinces. I think it was 11. And on top of that, it's also 25 security regions. Now, why is that important? If you're looking for a place to stay, most of the information you can find will be based on the province. The province is, so for instance, Groningen up in the north. So if you look at Groningen, Drenthe, Overijssel, Gelderland, and Friesland, that side of the country, even Flevoland, tends to have slightly cheaper property prices. All right. If you go to the dark blue ones, we're talking about North Holland, South Holland, which is where the people tend to get the name Holland from. But Holland is just used to be a county, or the Count of Holland, or Earl or Jarl, as you might know it from different parts of the world. And the county of Holland is also the mostly densely populated. So it also has the most houses, but also the biggest housing needs. So the property prices go through the roof. We'll have a little bit of a look in a second on how that is. Utrecht used to be a bishopric. It tends to be a little bit more relaxed as well. It's actually a very nice city and a province. Then you also get Zeeland in the south, where there's a huge exit currently of people because there's a lot of older people in Zeeland. There's not as much social stuff happening on there, but it also means there's lots of jobs there, especially jobs that you can be trained up into. One of those has to do with education and the other do with healthcare. Because of the aging population in Zeeland, there's a bigger need now for healthcare workers, and especially people can do day-to-day healthcare and helping people, just everything from bathing them to helping them do their dishes and things like that, all the way through to when we look at education, so teachers' assistants and things like that, especially English and mathematics, strangely enough. So if you have any qualifications in that direction, you're willing to learn Dutch, look at Zeeland as an option because they will welcome you there with open arms, especially when it comes to those two sectors and jobs. And those two sectors tend to help you find accommodation as well. So have a look at that. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we do jobs. And then we've got North Brabant and Limburg. Now, the joke is that the moment you go north of the river, so basically the other provinces that are not yellow, that everything south of the rivers is not really Netherlands, but it's just a joke. Down in Limburg, the food culture is much better. So if you like good food, good wine, slightly more classical French cooking, definitely an area to visit if you ever get the opportunity. So let's compare countries, because you come from Ukraine, I come from South Africa. We can maybe look at the Netherlands a little bit more objectively or from a different perspective. So I come from a country that's relatively big, and so do you. The Netherlands is small. I'm talking about really small. If you look at from the top, from the north to the south, all right, it is not a big country at all. It's sort of like if you take the length of the Netherlands and you fit it across Ukraine, I think you get it in 4 times or something like that. It's really a small country. But that also means in a small country, we can have great infrastructure. So that doesn't matter where you are in the Netherlands. If you're in a rural area or if you're in the city, and especially now with COVID, a lot of people started to move to the countryside because if you can do your work remotely, it's great. It's relaxed. There's not a lot of people screaming and shouting, especially if you're over the age of 40, 45, or maybe like me, over 50. You like a little bit of peace and quiet. So if you want to do a bit of peace and quiet, go there. I am seriously considering moving out of the city, but my better half is not to be found for that, and all our friends live close to us. So, but if ever I could, I would love to move to the countryside, because in the countryside you have the rural lifestyle, which is much more relaxed, but at the same time you have all the facilities. You even have fiber optic in most of the rural areas. So do not worry about internet and infrastructure. We'll show you a little bit in a bit what kind of what the doctor distance, for instance, is for the whole country. You know, it's unbelievable how close facilities are to you because it's such a small country. So now let's look at property prices. Now, there's a lot of people that have been asking me, what are property prices like in Amsterdam, or can I live in Amsterdam, and what is the rental like? Bad news. Amsterdam is horrendously expensive. All right, so I'm going to show you what Amsterdam looks like. You can see there on the map. Let me just bring it up for you next to me. The housing prices in Amsterdam is really hectic. Those dark red areas that you see, or let's say the purple little flecks that you see there in the middle, those purple flecks are more than 10,000 euros per square meter for purchasing. So we're talking about average house prices of around about 700 to 1.2, 1.3 million euros. It's ridiculous, all right? Especially since the previous financial crisis, and even during COVID, people were constructing and buying and selling houses. It was unbelievable how that went on. So the house prices have actually gone up quite a bit. My house, living in Amsterdam, has doubled in value over the last 5 years, and 3 times its value if I look back from 2005 when I bought it. So it is really hectic. That also means the rental prices are high. So on average in Amsterdam, it's about 20 to 22 euros per square meter. A typical house from before 1930s, where a large chunk of Amsterdam's central houses, so everything in the middle of Amsterdam inside the A10 ring road, most of those houses are from before the 1960s. And those houses are usually 55 to 65 square meters. After that, it goes up to about 80 square meters. Now, imagine 80 square meters multiplied, or 65 square meters multiplied by 20 euros per square meter. You start heading towards 1,500 euros for your rental per month. And that is just the four walls. Then you haven't paid the electricity or the gas or the local property taxes or the water or anything like that yet. So I'm going to show you some of the calculations you need to take into consideration. So I think for a lot of you, it might be handier if you have a bit of cash and you get a job to look for something just outside the city centers. Don't go for the smack bam middle of the city. It is horrendous expensive. So when you look at that Amsterdam map, you'll see at the bottom right, there's a place called Diemen, and then Diemen. See, the prices there is a lot lower. Or you look at towards Amsterdam West, the prices are a lot lower. Remember, train, bicycle, and bus will get you just about anywhere. Get a bicycle as soon as possible. You can get one really cheap at places like the Black Cycle Plan or Zwarte Fietsplan. And if you get a job, you can also get your bicycle often sponsored by your company. Now, the other thing is, if you live in a rural area, or even if you live in one city and need to commute to another city for work, very often your employer will pay for your commute. So train tickets and bus tickets and all those kind of things, they will either reimburse you or they will buy you the tickets, so they pay for a monthly ticket for you to travel. So part of that is when you get a job, please make sure that you negotiate to also include things like transport. Now remember, the Dutch are great negotiators, so don't easily take no for an answer. Ask what the possibilities are. That's something we'll talk about, contracts and jobs. All right, so now let's look at the properties and across the different provinces. We now know where the different provinces are, so let's have a look at what those provinces entail for us. So what you will see is North and South Holland, as I said, that has the most properties or the most people living there. So what I've indicated there are the statistics from the CBS. Now, how do they calculate this? Every single person in the Netherlands, that is you and every other citizen and every other resident. So it doesn't matter if you're a refugee or if you're a citizen or if you're a different European citizen and you're just working and living here, you have to register at an address. And that address where you register means you're attached to a town council or gemeente. And that town council then has responsibility for you. So that means if you're, let's say, for instance, a citizen and you're in a car accident and you all of a sudden are disabled, the local town council will be the ones providing you with the necessary subsidies and the homebound care. So it doesn't matter which part of the world you came in. It doesn't matter what date you crossed the border into the Netherlands. None of that's important. What is important is to get yourself registered in a town council as soon as possible, because that is going to determine a lot of the benefits and everything else you're going to get, where you're going to have to collect it from, how you're going to collect it. All those things will be bound to your town council. So make sure that you register in the place that you're going to live, because, for instance, if you come to Amsterdam, you register to Amsterdam, and then you're going to go live in Overijssel, that means you have to travel every time to Amsterdam to come and get your what they call living money, which is going to cost you money. So rather live in the place that you're registered as well. That is why the registration is there. So once you're registered, all those statistics are gathered. So that also determines if a place is occupied. So from that, the Netherlands government can see that house has somebody living in it. So if you look at these statistics, you'll see that the blue and the orange together are the total amount of houses in ownership. So the orange ones are unoccupied, so potentially available for sale. So if you look at the ownership in the Netherlands, across all the provinces, there are very few houses for sale. It's one of the reasons the house prices are so high. Now let's look at the rental market. So again, the same statistics, the same graph. And here you see the rental relatively to the occupied and unoccupied is slightly better, right? So there's slightly more available for rental. So let's look at the rental market and we just dive into that a little bit deeper. So the next thing you see here is in the rental market, there's an unoccupied rentals and a social housing by province. I've split it up. Now, here's important to note, what is social housing? Social housing is basically the government instructing a housing corporation to put aside a certain amount of the houses that they build for social housing. The short version of that is all houses under 750 euros basically qualify for that social housing market. There's a rental commission that will check what is the rental price that can be charged based on that. So you can imagine that if you're a house owner and you want to rent it out, you do not want to sit in that lower part of the rental market, because then you can get a cap that the housing association or basically the rental commission will basically enforce on you. So that is why a lot of the property owners, including myself, will basically put luxury fixtures and extra space in there, everything to get the point system above the 750, because then you can ask as much rent as you possibly want to. The drawback with that is that if you're in a part of the rental market that you would like to rent from the social housing or the lower market segment, that is very crowded. So that means there's not a lot of houses available. So look at that. So for instance, if you look at the orange ones, those are unoccupied, all right, rentals that are available. So that is for the total market. And then the blue one is the social housing component. So you see the social housing is a lot less that's available by comparison to the total market availability. So those orange ones are the ones not social housing, so from at 750 or above. Now, some of the housing corporations will make houses available round about 500, 600, 700, 800 mark, but they could still consider it private rental, and that also means that the price of the rental can go up faster, for instance, than what it does in the social housing market. To be eligible for the social housing market or for the those special houses made available by the housing corporations, you need to register separately, not just with your town council, but you need to register separately with an agency that is responsible for handing out those houses. Now, people that have immediate need tend to get priority. Now, that means that, for instance, if you come to the country as a refugee, and within that refugee state, you have to apply for your refugee status, and then you get residency. Now, you guys don't have to do that. You came in straight, you immediately get residency for at least 180 days. The European Union and the Netherlands agreed to signed up to that. So that means immediately you can go into that funnel. The drawback is to get into that funnel, there's a waiting list. So all refugees that came to the country previously, yourself, as well as people that are now, for instance, too old to live in an upstairs apartment anymore, needs to move to a ground floor apartment, they need to move. People where one of the family members, for instance, became ill and now somebody's taking care of them at home and they've come to live with them, they might need bigger accommodations. So they become take over that spot again. So all these emergency or immediate needs, there's quite a large chunk of that. So, and you're part of that. So it doesn't mean that anybody else gets preference. You are part of the highest preference getting into social housing. But if you're not registered local town council, you're not eligible for any of that. So make sure that you're registered as your town council, register for living money, and at the same time get yourself on the list for those housing corporations. Typical waiting list on that at the moment is between 2 and 3 years. In some places in Amsterdam, it's 11 to 12 years, just to give you an indication. All right. If you can get a job, please do. There's a lot of jobs available in the Netherlands, and a lot of them, if you can speak English especially. All right. So let's have a look at the security regions. Now, why are the security regions important? Now, the security regions, there's 25 of them. They all committed to make 2,000 spaces available per security region for emergency accommodation for Ukrainians. Now, I can imagine if Amsterdam makes 2,000 available, that's like a drop in the bucket. But if someplace like Zeeland makes 2,000 available, that's quite a large chunk for them, but that also means it won't be taken up as quickly maybe as in Amsterdam. So if you're looking for a place to stay, start looking at those places which is not as densely populated, because they still have made those places available. Also take consideration that this is considered temporary housing. So the temporary housing in different areas will be different. The worst is if there are no hotels or other large accommodation available to the town council, they will make things like football stadiums or hangars or things like that available, even tents available, and then they will populate those with bunk beds. Now, can you imagine if there's 400 or 500 people sleeping in one big hangar on stackable beds, just the amount of men snoring, can you imagine how bad that is? All right. So if you have the opportunity of living with someone or getting a job and getting anywhere else, I would strongly suggest please try, because I've seen how horrible those other places are, and I don't wish that on anybody. Right. So you want an apartment, you want a house. Let's look at what does that mean. I'll draw up a little flow diagram for you. So it's important, if you're watching this back, just remember to pause and go slowly through this. I try to make it as simplified as possible, because there's a lot of ifs and but, ors and so on, but this just gives you the basics. So the first thing you need to figure out is, can you pay that 750 euros? If you cannot pay that 750 euros or more, you're going to end up in the social housing market. If you end up in the social housing market, that goes through the local town council and registering with those agencies specifically attached to the housing corporations. I don't have them off the top of my head, but yeah, any housing corporation will have it listed on the website as to where do you need to register for that region. Of course, you'll remind me afterwards. I'll just put it in again in the comments below. So if you, however, have the opportunity to pay above the 750, remember, it's if you're able to pay above the 750, you also need to consider that anybody below the 750 also has to have a maximum income per year of 26,000 euros. So the moment you get a job where you earn more than that, you're not eligible for social housing anymore. So it's a really shitty situation that you're in at the moment, because you're going to get some money from the government, and if you're a family, for instance, especially if you're a slightly larger family, that family is each going to get some money. The moment one person starts working, that person loses their benefits, so that money from the government, but they can get their salary coming in plus that living money from the government. So have a look at that, because that might be a way for larger families. Get one person out there working, and let's say, for instance, mum came here with granny and grandpa and 2 kids. If granny and grandpa can look after the kids and mum can go out working, it'll just give you a jump in income and your possibilities as well. Okay. Okay, Vic is asking a question about social housing. Yes, we will put a link where you can register for the social housing element, but you have to start with your town council, and then within your town council, so the BSN number or Burger Service number, or basically social ID, is just so that the government has an ID number attached, so they can say, well, have they paid money to you or not? It's basically a tracking ID. So the living money you'll get from your local town council, but the registration for the social housing is a separate spot. They will have it on Vluchtelingenwerk, which is, they'll have it on their websites, but I'll also place some links in the comments below where you can link through to and register. So if you're in more than 26K a year, and or you can pay the 750, that's when you're looking at non-social housing. So there's private rental, and then it becomes easier. There's a website called funda.nl, funda.nl. We'll put that in the comments as well. So Funda is basically you can basically say every single house that will be rented in the Netherlands at some point will end up there. There's a real estate association called NVM, Nederlandse Vereniging van Makelaars. And they have their own IT systems. Within their IT systems, they list properties so that any other realtor can also look at that. So they first try and sell it to their own clients. That usually takes 3 to 4 days. Then it goes open to the open NVM market. So then they basically do any other NVM realtor. And about a week and a half later, sometimes 2 weeks on the outset, that goes onto Funda automatically. So anything that has not been immediately rented out eventually ends up on Funda. And that will cover about 80 to 90% of all rental houses in the Netherlands. But it also gives you a great opportunity to look at what are energy labels? What does that mean? What does it look like? What is the expected cost of energy, of electricity? All those things are listed with the property. You can get an idea of what the properties look like by looking at the photographs. Some of the newer ones will also have videos that will walk you through the property. And it will also show you things like certain areas, and you can search by map. So you can see which area do you want to search in. Remember those provinces we talked about earlier? You can take that map and you can zoom out basically on the map on Funda and zoom into the areas that you're interested in renting. All right. I just need to sneeze. Sorry about that. All right. Let's get back to where we were. So, and then from there, from Funda, you can find a lot of properties. So, rental prices per square meter. Yes, Vic, you're absolutely right. Ukrainian refugees, doesn't matter who you are. If you're in the Netherlands and you earn more than 26K a year, you cannot count on social housing. All right, that's for a single person. There are slight variations on that. If you're taking care of somebody that is that needs medical care, hospice care, anything like that, then that goes up. If you're if taking care of somebody that's disabled, or you are a person with a disability, then that value goes up. So this is sort of a general rule of thumb, but I think the top end of that is 38,000. So anywhere between 26 and 38,000, you're in the gray area, depending on the situation. Anything above 38,000, it will you won't get into social housing. No, social housing is meant for people that do not earn what we call a median income in the Netherlands. It is not meant for people that earn well. So, for instance, I don't qualify for social housing, not because I earn that much. On my salary, I could, but my husband does. My husband has a good job, so we don't qualify. So rental prices per square meter. So if you look at the bottom left there, you'll see the graph indicates sort of per square meter. Now, if you look at Amsterdam, which is in the North Holland, all right, again, you see the stuff colors by province, not by circle. You see there, Amsterdam is really expensive. So it goes towards the 20. It's about 22, 23 per square meter. So it is really hectic. So if you look at places like Groningen, Overijssel, Gelderland, Flevoland, all those places, including places like Friesland, all those ones to the right and to the top, those are places where it's quite cheap, and the same down with Zeeland. Now, living in a city. Now, I've just given you a little bit of an indication here on what is going to cost you to live in a city. So if we look at that graph, we can see that a large chunk, the biggest chunk, is made up of rental, and then this is your first month's rent. So you deposit the orange bit you can take out after the first month. Everything else will continue. So in general, you will be asked to pay a deposit on the private rental property, sometimes even the social housing as well. And they may ask you for a minimum income, or they may ask to get a letter of intent from your employer saying they're not planning on firing you at the end of your current contract period. Now, this is quite normal in the Netherlands to ask for these kind of things. It's quite easy to get. It's a standard form you get your employer to fill in. But people are careful not to rent out if they're not sure that you'll be able to pay the rent, because you're quite well protected. So if you live in a property for more than 2 years, it's almost impossible for the landlord to get you out. So as long as you pay your bills, you're fine. And if you're living in a property that's not doing very well, or it's not well maintained, you can do things like pay less rent after having warned the landlord a few times. So those kind of things you can say at the rental commission, or if you ever get stuck, just let me know, and we'll do a session maybe specifically on that. But the rental commission has some really interesting information there, and Google Translate should get most of the site quite well translated. Alternatively, I'm always available to answer questions if needs be. But yet again, expensive in cities. All right. Now, one other thing you need to know about rental properties. There's 3 states in which they will rent it to you. One is called furnished or gemeubileerd, which means it has curtains and it'll have carpets and it'll have everything, including cutlery, crockery usually, and every sort of conceivable amenity. So everything from a dishwasher all the way to an oven, microwave, all those kind of stuff. And it will have things like furniture, bed, mattress, all that. It may or may not include linen. All right. Then you get upholstered. Now, this is a weird one. Upholstered means curtains and a floor. And now that's one thing that might be weird coming from a different country. In the Netherlands, a floor covering, so that means either carpet or a laminate floor, is not standard. That is something that is only rented out when you say upholstered. Otherwise, if it's bare, it does not include any of those. Also look if it includes things like an oven, a fridge, and all those kind of things, because an oven is sometimes included in the upholstered, but not always in the bare, all right, or the kaal here. So that also means that property prices differ. So the rentals will differ, and the property prices I've been talking to you about, so the rental prices of about 750 or more, has to do with the bare version. The moment you go to upholstered, it goes up. The moment you go to furnished, it goes up again. All right. So just be careful with that you know that it might be handy to furnish, to rent something completely furnished, especially if you're someone like an accountant, a chartered accountant, a lawyer, anything like that. You might be able to get a job where your company will actually get you an apartment temporarily that is completely furnished. I know PricewaterhouseCoopers and EY and a lot of other the consultancy firms will do that as well. So the next thing is, of course, he's been telling me that people coming from Ukraine, same with South Africa where I'm from, are used to that their countryside does not necessarily offer the same amenities as you will get in the city. Now, that is true for partying. Absolutely. There are more nightclubs, there are more restaurants, there are more of everything in the city. But that doesn't mean there aren't anything in the countryside. So if you look at this graph that I've put up there, the very first one there shows you, I'm going to just zoom in a little bit, all right? You see there it says huisartspraktijk at the top. Now, huisartspraktijk is basically your GP. Now, everything with medical, if you ever wanted to know, in the Netherlands, the basic health insurance pays for everything you may need. It just doesn't cover dental and some special stuff, things like herbal medications or alternative medicines, those kind of things. The general stuff, if you've got a chronic illness, like for instance, if you're under cancer treatment, don't worry, just go to your general practitioner. They'll get you on the list. Now, the way that works is general practitioner in the Netherlands is a specialization. So when you want to go to an oncologist, which is a cancer specialist, your general practitioner has to refer you to that. So the general practitioner will know what blood tests to take, what kind of elements to do before they send you off to the specialist. Now, the specialists in general are associated with hospitals and very often university hospitals. Inside the hospital, any treatments you get there is called in-hospital budget. And that is also covered by basic medicine. So you do not have to worry about that. If just go to your general practitioner, ask them for help, and ask them, is this covered by the medical insurance that you have, which is the basic one? They will tell you. And if you say, well, I can't afford anything outside it, they will prescribe you medicine that falls within that. Don't worry about it. Just go to your doctor. Don't ever not go to the doctor if you're not feeling well. Please do go to the doctor. And just refer to them to the CAK. So CAK, Charlie Alpha Kilo. That's the association that's currently, or the insurance company is currently taking care of all Ukrainians coming to the Netherlands under this refugee status. So do not worry about that. People ask me, so what is covered and what's not covered? And there's a lot of panic about it. Do not worry. Just go to the doctor. Okay? Just whatever you do, just go. All right? They will tell you what will be covered and what not. But at the same time, you do not have to worry. 99% of stuff that you're going to run into on a general daily basis is going to be covered. Right. So, for instance, things like orthodontical implants for people over the age of 30 or 40 or something like that might not be covered, but for children it will be. So those are like the very specialized stuff. Again, dental care. Anything other than that, you'll probably be covered. So what I like about this little graph that I'm showing you there is that it says that the distance from anybody's house to a general practitioner. So if you look in 2020 in Groningen, it was 1.2 kilometers. So within 1.2 kilometers of wherever you will live in Groningen, on average, that is how far you will need to travel to get to a general practitioner. The same true for Friesland, Drenthe, Overijssel, Gelderland, and so forth. You see, the moment you go to North Holland, yes, it goes down. But do you mind cycling for 2 kilometers or for 1 kilometer? I mean, it's very little difference, right? Relatively to countries such as Ukraine, which is huge. So you guys are used to traveling those large distances. Same as me in South Africa. We travel large distances. We're not afraid of those. But in the Netherlands, you don't even have to. Right. This link below here will show you all those kind of statistics as well. You can see it for just about anything from nightclubs all the way through to sport associations, everything. On this website, it'll show you that. So I'm going to stop here with my babble, and I'm going to ask you to ask questions. And I just want to remind you, we have another session coming up, which is going to be about living in someone else's house. What are the psychology around it, and what can help you to do that? And we're also planning a session next week talking about working in the Netherlands. Hopefully this has been helpful so far to you. So please fire away with any questions that you may have. Just ask them in the chat. And there will be a bit of a delay because while I'm talking, you will you'll be typing, and from the time I talk till the time it actually gets to YouTube, it's about 10 seconds delay. So instead of just sitting here and not saying anything, I'm going to keep on talking, but please ask your questions. Even if you need to ask them in Russian or in Ukrainian, then Kostya will translate it for me, and then I can answer those questions for you as well. I'm also going to put up my contact details and that of Kostya's. These are LinkedIn profiles. You can just scan with your mobile phone and link to that and link to us, and you can ask questions at any time. So I see Maxim Ryabov have a question. You don't have to say you have a question. Just go question and then ask it. Right, you could offer it a sub rental for 3 months, Maxim. Yes. But a sublet, that's going to be a tricky one. If you stay with someone, you get something called living money. That living money, because you're living in with someone, has certain value. So I think it was 260 euros or something like that per person per month. Plus, you get an additional 205 if you're living in with someone, so not in the housing that the government has made available to you. So not temporary housing. So that means you will have a little bit more, But that also means that out of that 205, if that is the price of the sublet, then maybe. But if other than that, it's going to be difficult to pay that. With sub-rental, things that you need to be aware of is if the person has a social housing contract and they let you live with them and they don't charge you rent, then their social housing status will not be affected. If, however, they charge you rent and it ever comes out, then the government will remove their social housing benefit. If you donate some of the money to them that you're getting to help them with stuff around the house, it is up to you to do so. They cannot force you to do so. And in doing so, you basically have that sublet construction, but it's not a contractual thing. The other thing is, if they rent to you as a sublet, their landlord needs to give permission. If they let you live with them because you're a Ukrainian refugee, that may not be necessary. Sublet also means that you may or may not be able to register at that address. And if you're not able to register at that address, you also not get any of the benefits. So please check that it's a completely legal sublet. All right. And then finding a different apartment within 3 months, don't bargain on that. It took me a year and a half to find a place. When I came to the Netherlands, I got something from the company, and I was looking for a year and a half before I found anything I could rent myself. So it is, and that was 20 years ago, and the market now is worse. So if you can live with somebody, let me know. That might be better. Okay, if somebody wants to rent to you and they're going to go off for the summer and sub-rent, they might give you something which is called a rental agreement with a, not an ambassador's clause, with an embassy clause. The embassy clause means that they only rent to you for that time period, and at the end of that time period, you have to move out. Okay, so you cannot extend that rent. But if they rent to you during the summer, it might be that they're, It sounds like somebody taking advantage of the situation. I don't like that. But if that's a place that you can go and you can pay that amount, do so. I would rather, if I were you, just look at Funda. For that price, you will be able to find something. It might not be smack bam in the city, but you'll be able to find something for that price, and that will be long term. So, if you're living with a host family, remember you're getting money from the government because you're living with a host family. The moment you go into a rental apartment, you lose the that living with someone option. Okay, so you'll get half of what you normally get, as far as I've understood. Yes, you'll have to register at the new address, and you'll have to register at the gemeente. So even if you move over to there only for 3 months, you could stay with that hosting family, registered with them. Getting into a lot of trouble, because the moment they find out that you've done that, you may get your subsidies might be stopped. The one thing. The other thing is renting from someone for such a short period without a long-term benefit. I don't know if that's beneficial for you. If you want to rent for $13.50 a month, seriously, there are house sharing options. You can go to student websites. So, for instance, where the students 2 or 3 students, or young working people, so people in their late 20s, early 30s will be working, and they will rent out one of the rooms. So if you've got any kind of income separate from what the government's going to give you, then maybe look at that. Rather look at a house share than at at something like this. Does that sort of answer your question? Yes, Kostya, if you get your income from Ukraine, doesn't matter where your income comes from. If your income comes from Timbuktu, it doesn't matter. You have an income. So the moment you have income, you can rent a property. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of expat opportunities for properties. It's just basically your salary has to come in. If you can show that you've a permanent contract or a fixed contract, and that you earn above a certain amount, most renters will not have a problem with it, or landlords. If you have a land, it's only in the big cities basically that the landlords are so pedantic. Towards the countryside and the smaller cities or towns, they're not that bad. If you get a job today and you can start renting tomorrow, that's fine. The landlord may ask, I'm not saying will, but may ask just to get your company that's employing you stating that they do not have any intention of firing you. So that means that they just say the relationship is good at the moment. And that means at the end of your contract period, so if you have a 3-month contract period and they say, we'll give you a letter of intent that says, we're not planning on not hiring you beyond the 3 months, that's good enough for most landlords. The duration of your contract is more important than when you started it. I hope that helps, Vic. Let me just see if there's something else. Let's put the link for Funda in the chat as well. And registreren voor een sociale huur. There's something else to register for the social housing. In Amsterdam region, it's the place called Woningnet, where you need to register, or housing network. The different regions have different ones. I'm going to put the one for Amsterdam in here. The drawback with them is all that they're all in Dutch, so you're going to have to get somebody to go through the questions with you. The other thing is there's most rental apartments, the duration will be either less than 2 years or indefinite. So if they rent it out to you for a year, that will automatically extend by another year, and then after that, then it basically becomes permanent. Now, your rights, when it becomes permanent, are more, so it's more difficult to get you out. The rent can't go up as quickly again after that, and so it's those kind of things. So please read through the contract carefully. Also, ask for an English contract. In the Netherlands, because we're part of the European Union, you can ask for any contractual agreement, basically in Dutch and English. They will, however, say that the Dutch one is the official one. The same in Germany and the same in France, because English, French, and German are considered to be the main languages of the European Union, even after Brexit. So that means in the Netherlands, you could also ask, could you give me a French or a German translation? But I think English might be easier for you. Or some of you might actually speak great German. I don't know. Mine is a bit bad. Let's see if there's any other people at the moment. Don't see any more questions. Kostya, are you getting any questions coming in? All right, I don't see anything more. Well, hopefully this information has been helpful to you. Again, here is the stuff for links for Kostya and myself. Those are our LinkedIn profiles. Just scan that with a QR code with your mobile phone and link to us if you have any questions that you would like to ask. All right, I've got another question coming in from Elena. Hi, Elena. Is it possible to rent an apartment with somebody who's not your family, a friend, for example? In this case, it will be a contract as a tenant. Yes. There has been a law change. I'm not 100% sure if it's implemented countrywide yet, but anyway, it's on the way. I know it's already active in Amsterdam. That means to be able to rent to more than one person, or actually more than two people, the rules as follows. You can either rent as a family, so that means boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, and usually children. That is not standard to be a family construction of grandparents living in with parents, living in with grandchildren. That would be considered two households because the grandparents are adults and form a different household. So it's usually parents and children. The other option is for two people to rent. So that means two friends, for instance. The moment you want to rent for three people in the same property, then that landlord has to have special permission, because that's called room rentals. And then every single person in that property has to have their own contract. As far as I know, the new law also says that anybody that lives in an apartment, if there's two people renting, both people have to have their own contract with the landlord. All right. So that means if one person moves out, the other person doesn't automatically become responsible for the total rental price. It's the landlord's responsibility to make sure they find another one. And if you like somebody, or you know somebody that would like to have that spot, it's always easier for a landlord just to say, yeah, sure, no problem, if you've got a friend. Elena, I don't know what miblert means. Maybe that's a Ukrainian word. Kostya, can you look at that for me? Yes, you can have a 6-month contract. You can have a 12-month contract. You can have a 2-year contract. Remember, the contract is not that you have to stay there for the total duration. That is the maximum duration you can stay there. Many contracts have the opportunity to say, well, you have to live there for at least 2 months, but you can cancel or give a month's notice. It's most standard to have a month's notice period. So even if you rent for a year, you can say after 7 months, you know what, yeah, I found something different, and give a month's notice and move. All right. I hope that's answered the question for you, Elena. If there are any more questions, please just pop them in the chat. All right. Just looking to see if there's any more questions that's come in. Nothing. Notifications, Kostya. I do not see any questions coming in, Kostya, but I did see a notification. Just trying to look and see on Facebook if there's any more questions over there. No, there's just a lot of people going, thank you, thank you, thank you, which I'm very glad that I hope this helped you guys. And if there's anything more you would like to know, please do not hesitate to contact myself or Kostya, or join our group, Coaches4Ukraine. So that's Coaches, the number 4 Ukraine on Facebook. You can also ask questions there, and we will answer anything that we can. We may also refer you to other places where there's information available in Ukrainian, Russian, or in English. All right, hope this helps. If you have any more questions, please just leave them in the Facebook group, as I said, or the Facebook Messenger chat, and then we'll answer them there, or we may even add them at the in the comments section underneath the video if that is applicable, or something that we think other people might want to know as well. All right, so then I'm going to stop the stream. Thank you for your guys' time today, and thank you for joining, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this